So in the spirit of time, let's get started with our first session, The Future of Live. I want to introduce our moderator, Laura Mignott. Laura is CEO of DFLASH, a New York-based experience communications agency that designs global events and has created and executed everything from pop-ups and private dinners to multi-day global events for some of the most notable Fortune 500 brands like Netflix, Amazon, Samsung, and many, many more. So basically, we couldn't have a more perfect moderator to host a session about the shifts and pivots within live entertainment. And so we're so happy to have her be part of this. And with that, I do want to welcome Laura, and thank you so much again for joining us today.
Thanks so much. And thanks so much, Brittany, and the entire team for putting this on. I know how insane this is to build something along these lines. So congratulations on an awesome event. And so I want to kick this off by having everybody on this amazing panel of rock stars introduce themselves. So I'm going to do this by order of how I see you in the Brady Bunch side of the universe. So Eryn, if you can introduce yourself and tell everybody who you are.
Hi, everyone. I am the Senior Vice President of Content and Brand Strategy for Vinik Sports Group, which is the ownership group of the Tampa Bay Lightning. I come from the world of advertising in New York City for about 10 years, working on huge global campaigns for the likes of Budweiser and Gillette, NASCAR, so lots of branded content, television commercials. And before that, before this, I was working in Los Angeles in the world of esports and competitive gaming, helping to launch a kind of new digital entertainment network. And now I'm in Tampa.
Awesome. Big weather changes, obviously, not really. But so excited to have you, Eryn. And next on my list, Louis.
Hi, my name is Louis Zuniga. I'm a senior art director currently at Live Nation based in New York City. Similarly, I come from an advertising background, with a few smaller shops in Florida where I'm from, and then was in Atlanta for about 4 years at 22 Squared Independent Ad Agency. So been here for about 3 years now, just hit my 3-year anniversary last month actually. So just really excited about it.
Awesome. And Andy.
Hey, Andy Donner. I am coming to you from the Bay Area. I'm Chief Commercial Officer at Mixhalo, which is a startup venture in the Bay Area, which provides technology to create epic live experiences, mostly through audio. We basically tap the soundboard audio and deliver it to people's headphones, speakers, any other ways, so you could have like epic sound experience. I'll talk more about that. I've been in the live events industry for 6-7 years. I'm mostly on the ticketing side with Eventbrite, Ticketfly, and Pandora. And before that, mostly in kind of the transaction part of the economy, venture capital, investment banker, and then I have my own digital media startup.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Andy. And last but not least, Byron.
Hey, everybody. Good to be here with you. My name is Byron, and I am Global Executive Creative Director at Twitch. I oversee all the global brand creative as well as events, including TwitchCon. And super interesting moment in time for us right now as we're looking to onboard a lot of musicians and folks that would usually play in the live space, now coming on to live streaming. Prior to Twitch, I was at Hulu, where I kind of led the redesign of the current platform, as well as stood up the brand there, and 20 years in the agency world prior to that. So really great to be here and speak with you guys.
Awesome. We have such a phenomenal group of experts in the universe of agency and live. So I'm looking forward to a fantastic conversation. So, you know, we can't ignore the two kind of elephants in the room that have affected us, and actually why we're all not sitting on a stage somewhere like the Metropolitan Pavilion, like having a chat. And that's because of the pandemic as well as the racial unrest. So I would kick off every conversation with saying, how has the last few months with regard to the pandemic and recent racial unrest affected you and your business? And I'll go by order. So Andy.
Yeah, it's really, really interesting. So, I'll address that by even taking one step back before I joined Mixhalo. So how it affected me personally, I was at a ticketing company at Eventbrite that overnight the pandemic, the COVID crisis, which has sent seismic waves through the live event industry. And then if you're in the live event industry and you're an enabler of that, like ticketing, you're basically in the vector business, right? Your job is to bring people shoulder to shoulder to have these live experiences where you're sweating on each other and high-fiving. And that's not a good business to be in the time of a global pandemic. And so I was in the ticketing part of the world, and I was leading the global music group. And overnight, Eventbrite had to make some very difficult decisions. to basically go back to its root and move towards almost virtual events and basically get out of the live ticketing business, or basically put that on hold and basically cut the company in half. And out of that, I then pursued new opportunities, and I decided to join as Chief Commercial Officer Mixhalo. And for Mixhalo, in a very strange way, probably like the folks at Twitch and Zoom, there are a few sleepy corners of the industry that are benefiting. And I use in quotes because no one's really benefiting in such a time of difficulty. But there are opportunities that come out of applying technology in novel ways to create some sort of way of aggregating at this moment in time. Mixhalo, it turns out, I don't want to give a pitch on us, but it explains how we're actually, in an odd way, it's been weirdly good for us. Our technology, which allows people to tap right into the soundboard at concerts. The only two things that are more or less positive right now in the live event industry, one is streaming, which is whether you're Spotify or Twitch or Veeps or the like, which is people tapping live from home. Obviously, there's a little bit that's going on with broadcast TV, whether it's the NBA playing from the bubble or Premier League, but that's not really live, shoulder to shoulder. The only other area in sort of the otherwise darkness, the other sort of shimmer of light, is in the area of drive-in concerts and drive-in movie theaters and drive-in events. That is an area where our technology shines, because at a drive-in concert, the only three ways to do it is, one is to blast a PA at cars, and that's a really weird experience to sit in your car and listen to a PA through your windshield. Two is radio, which is a very old and staticky, if you will, technology. Or three is to deliver it through new network technologies, and we're pretty much the only technology out there that can do it. So we're powering drive-ins. For example, down in Anaheim right now at the Grove, we're powering the drive-in OC. I can talk more about that. So in an odd way right now, with me coming over as Chief Commercial Officer 2 months ago, we are just fielding requests left, right, and center in Europe and the US about how we can provide our technology. And the last thing I'll say, and I hand it back over, is we see this as a moment in time of generosity and goodwill, given all that's going on. And so we're really donating our technology in a lot of ways. So there's a COVID testing at the Dodger Stadium parking lot down in LA. 6,000 cars a day come through and get self-administered COVID testing. And we are donating our technology to that. So when people show up and they need to get instructions on how to do it, they get the audio through Mixhalo. So, we're really trying, there's a lot of pain out there, and we're trying to do what we can to help the industry get on its feet again. Thank you for the question.
Awesome, and thanks. And it's amazing to hear what you guys are doing and pivoting at the right moment in time and being at the right place, right time. How about for you, Eryn? Because I hear you had a move in the middle of this all.
Got to do that at least once. So yeah, I actually moved across the country and started this job in the midst of the pandemic. And so for me personally, it's been very interesting because I've had to get to know my entire staff virtually, and kind of in the midst of hockey being on hold, to now, training camp opening up and us getting ready to kind of get into moving to Toronto and what the playoffs will look like. But for us, from a COVID perspective, is trying to understand, from a hockey operations perspective, what's happening, what's going on, how are we communicating with the league, what does resume to play look like? In this regard, we know it's all going to be virtual, but then we're thinking about, what does the next season look like? Are we going to have fans? Are we not going to have fans? So we've been trying to put all of that in perspective. And for me, it's understanding the world of sport from this side, and trying to, think about content in new and innovative ways, because that's what this opportunity is providing us, or this challenge. In regard to the social unrest or social injustice, that is, something else that was very unique to walk into. The Tampa Bay Lightning and the Vinik family have been really generous here in the city of Tampa, and kind of understanding what they're doing in the community. And for us, it's been really about let's do things the right way, not in the right time. And so we're educating ourselves as individuals and teams, and getting to know the community in a different way, so that way we can be truly effective and leaders in this community across, all facets. We are a diverse community, both from the Hispanic and the African American perspective. So we need to take that into consideration. So I will say it's been a fascinating 2.5 months, if you will.
Awesome. And it's just key, you know, to listen, to learn, and then to act, and not just to jump in because you think you have to. So that's so key. How about for you, Louis?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I would echo a few things that Andy even mentioned earlier. I think this is definitely not the summer concert season that we were expecting, but at the same time, I think kind of like an unexpected result of this pandemic is very much a renewed focus on creativity and innovation and just how we're finding new ways to collaborate and connect with each other. I think a lot of us have had to find, very much a topic of this series, have had to find new ways to work with each other, work from home, set up spaces. I bought a desk. Like I haven't had a desk ever. I stand for one, and then I have one coming to you live from one. So, I mean, even something as simple as that, really finding how your own personal space can, be efficient and make it, a place that you can actually collaborate with your friends. But similarly, I think the Live at the Drive-In, those concerts are really exciting. We're doing those at Live Nation. And I think the point I want to make for sure is that, Live isn't gone. It hasn't gone anywhere. It's very much just adapting, evolving, we're innovating. And I'm sure we'll touch on a few of those things as we move forward.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. And Byron?
Yeah, it's certainly been a complex few months. There's been multiple challenges that we've had to face as an organization, but just as well as the people across the nation and across the world right now. I think, there's been a bit of a contrast and paradox in that, the business side of Twitch has been booming, or the viewership side at least. I think this last quarter we clocked over something like 5 billion hours watched, which was up over 60% from the quarter before in terms of hours watched. And I think over 80% year on year. So it's this huge explosion of activity on Twitch in the midst of everything that's going on. I think one thing remains true is that, Twitch has always been a community-driven platform, and this is about people feeling connected to each other. I think that's why we're seeing so much activity on the platform at this moment in time. We're also bringing on new types of audiences and new types of creators. As I mentioned earlier, we've got a lot of musicians coming onto the platform at the moment, and we definitely see music as sort of the next, the adjacent category that we're pushing into right now to support. So, trying to figure out within our identity as a brand, how do we make sure that we accommodate for the new plethora of creators and audience that come onto the platform has been job number one. But at the same time, just making sure that as a leader, I am reminding myself that, job number one really is about being as human as possible and staying connected with my team and making them feel connected to each other, and ensuring that we are purpose-driven in everything that we do every day. I think in terms of the racial injustice piece, we've definitely taken the strategic approach of really shining a spotlight on our Black and diverse creators on the platform. We've been partnering up with folks off platform. I know we've had a couple of good concerts. Last month, for example, we had Black Power with Kamasi, which was really successful. And I think we are definitely stepping through some big strategic ambitions at the moment. And I think we'll be able to reveal a bit more of that very soon. But yeah, it's been a hell of a ride the last couple of months. It's been interesting.
Yeah, I think no one could have predicted it, on January 1st, 2020, that the industry that we all are so deeply immersed in and love would kind of go all kinds of sideways. And the ability to adapt is what makes it interesting and unique. And, thinking about that, I was thinking about what is the thing that we miss the most is so unusual that we don't even think about. And I'm like, when are we ever going to high five again? Like something as simple as that. And so for you guys, what do you guys think? Like, what do you think is going to happen next for us?
I think coming from the sports side, obviously high fives are something that's intrinsic from the players to the fans. I think it's just everything's going to be a bit reimagined. Like when I think about like from a sports perspective or even brands, right? Like it's this human connection and it goes beyond the physical space. Your affinity for the Tampa Bay Lightning is bigger than you being in the stadium. And quite frankly, more people are watching games outside of the stadium than they are inside the stadium, right? So for us, it's that human interaction and that social and that sharing that people are going to feel like that's not going to go away. Like people are going to go back to sports. They're going to go back to music concerts. It's just how do we now, this is like an evolution. So how are we thinking about, with the greater focus on the home audience and the incorporation of fans, like that's what we're driving ourselves to is like, we're never going to replace a high five. Like you just can't. So how do you do this? So same, just like a virtual cheers. But it's like, how are we continuing to reimagine and just kind of evolve that experience?
Yeah, I'll pick up on that. And by the way, the high five for sure. I mean, candidly, the hardest part I'm having there's on a lot of levels. There's a high five, but hugging. I mean, I'm a hugger. I'll just put it out there. And like, it's just so weird to then like be 6 feet away from someone who you've always used to hug, and then you kind of can't do it. It's just like, I don't know, there's almost a notion of like living in a bubble. It's just so incredibly weird. But picking up what Eryn and, a lot of themes here is, what we don't know, of course, no one knows how long this is going to go on for sure. But the thing that seems to be really clear to me is that the longer this goes on, the more you're going to see new behaviors, new ideas, and openness that's going to occur. So no question about it that we're going to go back to the tribe. Like the one thing that is, we're humans, we need to be around each other. We need live, which has been going on since the campfire. And we are going to get back around hockey games and music concerts and public and, we're just going to do that. No question about it. What's interesting is sort of the hybridization that's going to go on. So the longer this happens, the more people are experimenting with new behaviors and habits and technologies. They're going to find their way in really interesting ways into the post-COVID world. And you're going to have this like estuary of new innovations and technologies. And so are some of the technology that is on the couch right now going to find its way into live? I think that's going to be really interesting in how we get even a better live fan experience of taking some of the things that's going on live right now, going at home into live for sure. I think some of the things that people are experiencing in live are going to make it into home. So interesting with Twitch, I think one thing that you're going to see is really purpose-built and specialized, video platforms for music and comedy out there that kind of combine the best of what's going on in live and at home, where you're an event producer and you're like, how do you create a great experience into the home? So now when bands in the future are touring, rather than being on the road maybe 120 days, they're on the road 80 days, and they do 40 shows where they can reach a larger global audience. So to me, coming out of this, and I'm a kind of a hopeful guy, is right now when everything is upside down, we're in kind of like like Stranger Things, we're in kind of the upside down world. One interesting thing that's kind of going on, and I'm showing the perspective of a startup, is people are taking calls, people are open, minds are open and doors are open, and people are exploring new things because everything's broken right now. And that's a really good thing. And a lot of like historical biases and prejudices are shattered. And so out of that, I'm hoping that post-COVID, we have the best of what we had before, plus a lot of the new behaviors and innovation we're seeing right now to create something magical, both live and at home afterward.
Cool. Hey, Louis, what about for you?
Yeah, definitely. Eryn touched on it a little bit briefly, but I think when we talk about high fives and being together, there's that sense of community. If you're a lover of live music, you understand that there is that sense of community. And I think a really great example of that, it's funny, we're talking about it kind of now already, but the virtual rave-a-thons that have been going on with Insomniacs, they're part of the Live Nation family. And I think if you've had a chance to tune into one of them, really, they're impressive. The production value is amazing. That is very much international property that brings fans from all over the world together. And, we worked together with the EDC Las Vegas one as part of one of our brand partnerships. And I think what was, really exciting and that I noticed a part of that is the fact that fans were like very much engaged. Like you have that sense of community, but they're very much engaged. I think on social, they were sharing their favorite memories, tagging things from the festivals that they'd gone to in the past, looking forward to it in the future, making jokes with the live host who kind of worked as the MC. But I think for me, the thing that really resonated was the fact that everybody was very much making plans to meet up in person, once we can. People that love, I can't wait to see you at that stage once we can. And I think that sense of community, that sense of connection is still very much there. And it's just, again, really a testament to that community that, you're seeing at live, and you're continuing to see it even virtually right now.
Cool. And Brian, what about you?
Yeah, it's very interesting hearing a lot of themes being echoed across all the different speakers, and actually points of view shared with me, and how we're approaching this notion of interaction through the lens of Twitch and the platform. We've always been kind of an interactive platform, and I agree, Eryn, there is nothing that can replace true liveness of something and being in-person sort of contact and communication. But what we try and do is really look for fresh and unique ways to bring about interactivity between streamers and the audience and the community. So, everything from, we're definitely looking at a new slate of original content that we're building out. At the heart of every piece that we're sort of developing right now is this notion of interactivity that brings the viewer closer to the streamer or the participant in the actual show. So, we have things like extensions that allow you to affect the outcome of certain things IRL. But we also have a triangulation of persistent chat that is sort of like natively embedded into Twitch. And I think there is this magic of connection that we are definitely built upon. That is the thing that kind of makes Twitch unique, and is the thing that we'll continue to build on. I will say, it's been interesting for me managing a brand that is really all about live streaming, and then also having to manage, for example, the replacement of something like TwitchCon, which is an IRL event. It's kind of a paradox, we know that we're never going to be able to replace that feeling of being in person with your friends after the sojourn to something like TwitchCon. But it's really pushing us to be a lot more creative in how we look to build bridges into that, into the world of the viewers, between the audience and the streamers. So keep your eyes open. We've got some interesting things coming up. I can't give away too much at the moment, but really, I think there's some good things on the horizon in the short term that I'm excited to share with you guys.
Byron, what I think is really amazing about Twitch and the, coming from the world of gaming for a little bit in my career, is that interconnectivity was there before, right? Like those of me right now being in the sports world, looking at what gaming has done to kind of keep those fans engaged and connected is something that we're all trying to do, right? To kind of have that shared experience virtually is something that we're like seriously trying to replicate. If you think about, how do we reimagine what a pregame looks like with fan zones? And, what does that look like in using breakout rooms with Zoom, or, conversations, and how do you make a broadcast more interesting by, having people being able to chat alongside a broadcast? Like all of those things that, gaming has been doing, is going to be interesting to see how that translates into the world of sport.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Awesome. You just took my next question, Eryn. It's all good. No, yeah, I think, because building off of that, I think the question is like, how do you get the fans to feel like they're part of this experience now? Because, especially in the land of sports, because yeah, we want people to line up and like get our football signed by our players. We want someone to sign a hockey stick, or I want to catch the puck when I feel like flying into the stands. Like, how are you guys seeing that? How do you sort of reimagine the live experience as best you can during this very uncertain time?
I hope nobody's trying to catch a puck. That's for sure. That might hurt.
Hit your head. It's all good. Come on.
I think we're still trying to, for us, we're still trying to figure that out. In the sense of how are we leveraging and utilizing kind of the Zoom technology, like I mentioned, for like breakout rooms, and how do you do a pregame where you have music as a part of it, like with Live Nation? How do you do chalk talks? How do you do celebrities? Are people willing to do that? Watching a game at home is kind of a singular fan experience anyway. So how are you actually trying to bring people together? So I think you're going to see a lot of testing in what people are doing to see what could work. You look at kind of what the PGA did with the Charles Schwab Challenge. They basically had, they worked with Twitter and had 9 individual streams kind of coming in with different people commentating on what was happening in the action. So whether it was, an Annika Sorensen to a celebrity on The Bachelorette, kind of taking different perspectives in view. I think that's what's allowing us to kind of just try things right now. And just see what works. We're literally going to test and learn.
Yeah, I think folks are not going to freak out if you try something and it's like, this is different. It's like, well, okay, well, you tried something, because we all know that we're all learning at the exact same time, because we are all stuck together at this particular moment. And, for Louis, I guess on your side, the Live Nation side of the universe, like, what are you guys thinking? Because, I think of just going to concerts, like, it's the summer. Like, I have my whole roster of things I'm supposed to be going to, and I'm going to none of them. No Governor's Ball, So how are you guys trying to find the ways to sort of replicate that live experience online as best you can?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's less about trying to replicate the exact live experience, but taking a look at ways to evolve it, right? So, we talk about the fan journey and the fact that, people often think that it's really just the show, the actual experience itself, but really it's so much more than that. It's the before, everything leading up to it, preparation, the show itself, and then everything after, when you want to kind of relive the experience and share that out with your friends. So I think, being part of the media and sponsorship team, I think a lot of that does come into play. We're thinking about ways to, address each parts of that. But even just thinking about, ways that we can do that, I think in the, before the actual show itself, I think we're seeing artists be much more collaborative, right? I think we've seen different artists hey, I'm planning a set list and I would love for you to be a part of it, or opening it up to song requests. What are some songs that I haven't performed in a long time that maybe I was part of like this kind of stripped down or alternate version of this show? I want to bring the fan into that experience. So I think that's something that we're continuing to see, and is a really interesting thing because artists do want to perform and want to be collaborative with that. I mean, we're even seeing virtually, Zoom bombing and jumping into chat rooms and having that interaction with fans that you otherwise might not be able to. I think that's been really exciting. The actual experience itself, I think there's a really great intersection when it comes to physical and digital, right? So when you're watching a show from home, I think there's a really great thinking behind what can we do to augment that experience. We send something to you in the mail ahead of time so that you're able to, add on to what you're experiencing. You think about brands that can provide food or beverage. So you've got a meal plan for your show, or, hair and makeup outfits. So the fact that is that there's a really great process and experience that goes into getting ready for a show, getting ready with your friends, trying on different things, picking your right outfits. I think that experience has evolved a bit more as well. And you can really imagine all the different ways that we can, work with people and work with brands ahead of time before the show. And honestly, virtual meet and greets, like those are still happening as well. Like you're still able to meet your favorite artists. Maybe you're doing it through a screen right now, but when it's the right time, we're excited for those to come back as well. But a lot of great creative thinking, that's really our team's job, to try and find those exciting ways to, really make that live experience really exciting for everyone.
Yeah, it's just so fun to see how much is stretched now. And like, I think, artists are now more accessible than ever, and they're letting you into their homes, and they want you to like be a part of this conversation, as opposed to like, we're all over here, and so we can't actually interact anymore. So it's fascinating to see how far it can go.
Yeah, it's a really interesting sort of dichotomy and sort of irony in that regard, is that in a time when artists, musicians, athletes are as far away as ever from fans because they're not playing in front, there's almost an overcompensation to get closer to fans, right? Through communities, through chats. You look at platforms like, Patreon, for example. I mean, I'm really fascinated by that, or, Cameo, which is a little cheesy, but like in that regard, which is, this whole notion of like passion platforms that allow, artists and speakers and poets and comedians to interact directly with their audience. And I think you're going to start to see that. And it's going to be interesting for Eryn and professional sports to see how that then translates, going forward. Is that going to continue where there's going to be new platforms and methodologies to allow fans to get closer to artists, right? And so, in music, and, Louis was hitting on this. I mean, I think that it's going to be interesting to see whether you're going to see, fans be able to vote on encore songs. And something that, we've been experimenting with, Mixhalo, where, we were about to do the Sting residency in Las Vegas, using the platform. And for folks who are using Mixhalo for their sound, there was going to be an artist interaction with Sting, and there's going to be a voting mechanism to be able to vote on a song. And that was pre-COVID. And so now, in a world here where this is going on anyway, I think one thing you're going to start to see is an overcompensation in a good way of artists and musicians and sports fans getting closer to the fans using a lot of these tools. And I think that's only going to be a good thing. And on a macro level, I'd actually love to hear from Eryn in this, is how the sports teams are feeling post-COVID of the sentiment of bringing fans, back into the stadium. Like, whether in a world where there may be some reticence, maybe the economy is where it is, and like it's going to almost have to have that much better of an experience to bring fans back, or whether just the fact that the doors are open, people are going to come in. My gut tells me that it's going to be, it's going to be unequally distributed, but my gut tells me that, there is going to be a reticence, and that using ways of allowing fans to get closer to artists and closer to the music there's going to be new innovation to get people to come back in droves. And that'll be a good thing, I think, relative to the fan experience.
From a sports perspective, I guess, just to piggyback off that, I think we have to look at, I think there's going to be an excitement. I think the research is showing that fans do want to come back into the stadiums. I think outdoor venues are going to have an easier time than indoor venues in the short term. But the research is showing that fans will come back. And I think that's, what that experience is when they come back will be completely reimagined due to COVID, from cashless, all the different kind of technologies that we're going to have to undertake. But I think it's going to have to be a split. Like, we don't know if we're going to be at 100% capacity. So how are we actually augmenting that experience digitally? And we're not there yet. I think we're thinking about all the different potentials. I think that we're thinking about that, but right now we're trying to get through the playoffs and win a Stanley Cup over the next couple of weeks.
And you will.
But those are all certainly things that, from a technology and innovation team to the operation team to, you know, to my team and others, it's going to be really paramount for us to collaborate on.
Right on.
And, you know, building off of that, for Byron, you know, being part of Twitch, you know, you guys are kind of almost like the granddaddy of this, because way before anyone was even thinking about fan interactivity, you guys were there. So as we sort of move through this really unusual paradigm, where do you sort of see us going?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I predict a little bit of fatigue, just like digital fatigue in general. I think everybody's so deep in it right now because they crave the sense of connection. And you know, we're on Zoom calls all day, every day. For those of us lucky enough to be able to be working remotely, when we're not doing that, we're plugging into our different social channels, and just we're really craving the sense of connection right now. So I'm predicting a little bit of burnout from that, to be honest with you. I think maybe in the immediate future, but after that, we'll probably find that the experimentation that Eryn and Louis and Andy were speaking to, which I think is a very real thing right now, this creative experimentation, is probably going to start bearing some fruit. And you're going to see some new landscapes evolving that would, you know, drive new behaviors, but also be sort of founded on existing behaviors. You know, prior to joining Twitch, I mentioned I led the end-to-end design for Hulu's product experience for the first time. They were blending live and SVOD. So we had this kind of like blended notion of what is live stream or live programming versus, video on demand. And I think that one of the behaviors that was super interesting to uncover at that stage, which most of us will be familiar with, is that, you know, as human beings, we're never in one state or mode of behavior forever. We can oscillate between this need to kind of like lean in and lean back. So we're seeing that that's always been inherent on whether it's the Hulu platform or the Twitch platform. I've noticed the same. And so, you know, while we try and experiment into new ways to bring us closer together, we've also got to kind of honor the duality of the behavior of allowing folks to feel comfortable and leaning back sometimes. So that is something that I think we're going to start seeing reflected in this new landscape that starts occurring post burnout, which I'm predicting.
Yeah, I think we've hit that moment of like, we all are over Zoom at this point, and the behavior of like having back-to-back Zoom calls came up in like April and into June, and now that we're into July, like, you know, it's like I cannot do this, and so that moderation is going to be really key in terms of finding the balance between the two as we continue to go through this, because we don't know if a year from now we'll still be going through this. I guess it leads to another question. So, you know, where it's, you know, July 2020, where do you all think we're going to be July 2021? Like, is this, you know, thinking of a vaccine or some degree of mitigation whereby we can actually go back outside and, you know, be back in venues? What do you think is going to happen with our beloved live events industry?
I'll jump in on that. You know, I'm a general optimist. I think this is the doom and gloom. You know, cue up, you know, really sort of sad music in the background. I'm not terribly hopeful, you know, about this on this, because if you just look at the last several months and the definition of what's essential, and that you get into a very philosophical conversation about live events being essential, which I'd argue it's essential as anything else out there, but you know, it's going to be the last thing that's going to come online. In terms of the politicians, you know, I'm in California, so I'm a little bit skewed on this with, you know, Gavin as being at the forefront of this. I think, you know, the last thing that's going to come online is the, you know, Coachellas and, you know, Staples Centers of 15, 20,000 people being allowed to come in shoulder to shoulder. It's going to be the absolute last thing. It's not politically wise for any of our leaders to do that. So I think what we're going to see is the big sporting events, the big festivals, the big music events. To me, you're not going to see, you know, really global tours until mid to late 2021. And I think we're going to be in this world of experimentation of socially distanced events, drive-in events, Zoom events. Until then, it's either going to be a vaccine or some sort of, you know, tribal immunity, herd immunity that's going to occur. You know, right now, you know, I got 2 kids. there's a talk about whether schools are going to even be open next year, right? And until you have schools open, you can't even imagine the conversation about having a festival that's open. And then I'll end on this, the folks to go to really understand is the agents. There's no one out there that has, a greater economic interest to get this all going than agents. And I deal with, agents on every single day. And you talk to them about the models they're building relative to their artists, their athletes, their tours that are out there. And what I'm hearing is they're not really planning until mid-2021 for the return of anything of normalcy. So sorry to be the voice of depression.
Listen, it's going to be an unusual set of circumstances to adapt to. Hey, Louis, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to speak to any dates for sure, because again, there's so much of it that's unknown, but I definitely do want to speak to the sentiment. I mean, I think the fact of the matter is that live is not going anywhere. It's just when can we return to it, and when's the right time for everyone to do it safely. So like myself and a lot of my friends, like coworkers, we all very much are hanging on to those concert tickets. I think I've got 5 different shows I've got tickets to that I'm very much hanging on to. I know everyone on this call probably thinks that I get free tickets to everything, and I don't. But for the concert tickets that I do have, I'm hanging on to them. We're very much, the sentiment is that, like, we're excited. We're looking forward to those shows, and when it's the right time, we're going to do that. We touched on it earlier, but something that has been, I think, really interesting is the fact that we do have these live at the drive-ins, right? It's kind of like our, we're experimenting, we're trying things out. And with those, I think they kicked off last week in Nashville, Indianapolis, and St. Louis. So we had artists like Brad Paisley, Nelly, Darius Rucker, but the fan sentiment overall from that is that it was very much a welcome return, if you will. It's a little different, of course, we have to recognize that, but the actual experience itself, people were able to kind of drive up their cars. You had a section right next to your car. See Andy nodding a lot, but yeah, this experience, it's fantastic. You get a bit of tailgating as part of it. You got the show. You're able to be with music lovers at a safe distance, which I personally really love, because again, that sense of community, just being able to wave and see everybody having a really great time out in the outdoors. I think that we're gonna see more of that. But again, like, the artists want to perform, the fans want to attend. And at Live Nation, we're constantly exploring different ways to bring those people together, and again, to do it safely.
Yeah, I think from our side, with regard to where we're going to be next year, I have no idea. I can have my own optimism or whatnot. I think what we're planning on more than anything else is, how do we safely open? Is it 25%? Is it 50%? All of those things. I think those are the steps that we're taking in place. Where we want to create that environment where people, at the end of the day, when we think about reopening, right, we've got to build confidence that people can come into this building, right, and to enjoy this experience. And so there's a lot of factors I think we'll be looking at. And, I will say, hopefully July 2021, that hockey's being played, and that our 2021 season is coming to a close in a condensed, shortened 80 some odd game season. But I think there's just a lot of unknowns that we're all still wrestling with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would agree with all of that. I think none of us really know where we're going to be this time next year. I think that what I try and look to is, whenever we are faced with a set of, as humans, faced with such a severe set of challenges, it's usually when we are at our most creative. So whenever that moment of time is that we do get back together IRL and things do open up again, I think there is an inherent human need for us to want to be together and to want to share experiences. I'm hoping that we've taken advantage of this moment in time to really find creative solutions, to focus on what matters most, and really learn a lot about ourselves. I think that this is almost a moment of incubation for us. And I think that there is a great opportunity for us to really stretch our minds and come to the table with creative solutions at this moment in time that really should level up our quality of living when we do return back to quote unquote normal.
I think one thing that we mentioned earlier, like this being kind of an evolution, it's going to be really fascinating when we do get back to, what we're accustomed to, the pressures that we're all going to face in how we adjust to that with all these new advances that we've done and all this new evolution. Like, where does that take us, at that point? I don't have the answers, but I think it's going to be something fascinating for us to creatively watch.
And to add to that, one thing that I'm constantly amazed by staring into the screen all day is this moment of self-reflection. that we're all going through. And even like on a very basic level, you think about it, like you're looking to a screen right now and you're probably seeing yourself, right? When of our life, like have all of us collectively been so aware of, and just talking about in a very Zen way, what's going on, what it's about, our purpose, what's going on in our industry. So, I just echo a bunch of the comments here about creativity and innovation. I think absolutely, but I think on a very human level, I think it's confronting all of us to ask the big questions. What are we about? What's our industry about? What do I want to be doing? What do I want for our community? And Laura comes all the way back to a lot of the other themes of what's going on with demonstrations and the social strife in our country. One of the things that the longer this goes on, it is while it's painful and difficult, one thing that I'm finding in a very beautiful way for my family and I and our community is it's just confronting us to ask some really, really big questions. And that's a good thing. And it's long overdue in this country, particularly what's been going on in the last 3 years and beyond.
Yeah, I think, look, we're not the same. And I think we're all acknowledging the fact that what's happened now has sort of ripped open all of our previous biases and thoughts and fears all out onto the open in a way that would never have happened before. One of the reasons the protests have been effective is because everyone is home and was able to watch that video, and you couldn't escape it. And so collectively, we're now sort of in this one sense of mourning, because we've all kind of mourned for what we thought this country might have been for some folks. For other folks, but especially people of color, like, yeah, we knew this was a situation. And as we look towards where we go next, it's going to be like, well, how do we actually sort of start something new? Because we can't go back. Whatever the old was is the old. And where do we go from here is actually the focus. And it's like, how do we approach life? Because look, you think about your artists now, more artists more than ever are speaking out, more athletes are speaking out more than ever on all of their platforms. It's not, some of them are doing great jobs of it, some of them not so much. But you're getting those conversations that you would never have had before. So it is, in a way, like a new freedom has arisen out of this. And as a result of that, that puts us in a position to do a lot better going forward. So as we think of where we go and the next year, hopefully we'll break the chains of bad behavior and put us all in a place where we can do a lot more and be better to each other. I think that's probably a thing about all of us. How do we end up being better to each other? Like the way we communicate on platforms, do we not be obnoxious and mean in our comments during chats, and all as we're sports fans now, how does that all work? So I think as we look towards how do we end up being better people is going to be a key for us all.
Amen. Well said.
Mm-hmm. And last but not least, I think a question so. All right, so here's where we're going to be, still stuck in here. What's the one thing that you hope that you bring along to you, and when we get to the other side, one thing you started to do now that either from business or personal that you hope that you'll bring to you when we get back to normal, well, new normal?
Wow.
I'd say for me, it's willing to try new things. I mean, we always say that in our own personal lives, but I think being able to live that even through your work as well, being unafraid to experiment, really challenging your brands to do the same as well. They're navigating this along with us, trying to find new opportunities. So, even again, I mentioned it earlier, as simple as buying a desk. I was so hell-bent against buying a desk, but I have one, and now I've made working from home part of my situation as well. So really, it's changing your structures, changing your way of thinking. And I think just being willing to do the work to do that, and really pushing everyone that you work with, especially your brands and your partners and your coworkers, to do the same.
I think to build on that, Louis, I think one of the things from a creative perspective is the yes and. Instead of being met with well, we've always done this or we've always done that, whether it be personally or professionally, it's the yes and. I think it's just continuing to ask yourself that.
Awesome. Andy?
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't have said it any better. It really is this notion of open mind, open heart, self-awareness, and inquiry and questioning, both on a personal, on a family, community, industry, and kind of international level, is really just asking those questions, which we're being confronted to. And then I'm just hoping when we go back to some steady state of normalcy that we carry that with us. and we don't lose sight of that. And in a lot of ways, I mean, I sort of think back to, my grandfather. He was a child during the Great Depression, and he carried that with him always, and it was like this albatross around it. But it was this lens that he shined on it. I almost wonder, in a good way, like, we're going through a lot of pain right now, but we're going to bring this with us, and we're going to hopefully continue to shine light on that. And I think from an industry, it's going to confront us in interesting ways to say, like, well, what if, right? And it was like, one example, I came from the ticketing business, and it was an industry that just sort of plodded along. You have growing, and no one asks the hard questions, like, what if the music stops, right? What if there's no events? What does that then mean? No one was asking those type of questions. And I think out of this, on all parts of life, people are now starting to ask these questions that weren't there before, and it's a very good thing to do. And so I'm hoping that those questions, that inquiry, that continues going forward when we go back to in real life.
Cool. And Brian?
Definitely a profound sense of humility, I think, is probably the one thing that I want to carry with me as we move forward. And just gratitude for realizing what the important things are and keeping focus on those important things. And then I think, to Andy's point, definitely a bit of a sort of stoic approach, learning to consider what the worst case scenario is and be okay with that, and then sort of build from that perspective is something that I've definitely learned to want to bring with me.
Awesome. Well, you guys have been phenomenal and a fantastic conversation. I mean, we could keep on chatting about this for quite a bit, but I think we're getting a sign that we got to bounce. But, I think, thank you to the audience for great late listening and just really amazing thought processes around this. I think, we're all in this, yes, together. But the more that we can have different perspectives that can really shine a light on what they're seeing, the better that we all learn and the more creative we can all be. So thank you all for a great conversation. And with that, I think I'll turn it back over to Brittany.